Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, I welcome you all to the joint webinar of NICE and United Service Institution of India on Dynamics of India-China-Pakistan, Contestations and Implications. I extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, Major General BK Sharma, Director, United Service Institution of India, Chair for the session, Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, Research Director of NICE, and participants who have joined us through Zoom and are watching us live on Facebook. We are glad to witness your presence today. The chair for the session, Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, is the Research Director at Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. He has been regular and visiting faculty at different universities of Nepal and China. He is a Senior Fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, New Delhi, and General Secretary at Center for Diplomacy and Development, Kathmandu. Previously, he has worked with Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, New Delhi, and has tele-corresponded with the Rising Nepal. He is the member of the editorial board, Journal for International Affairs, Kathmandu, member of the academic committee at an institution in Beijing, member of International Advisory Committee, Journal of Liberty and International Affairs, Macedonia, and the member of the editorial board, Gandhara Journal of Research in Social Science, and member of Subject Committee in International Relations and Diplomacy, Tribhuvan University. He holds Masters, MPhil, and PhD from School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. In addition, he has authored, edited, and co-edited 10 books on China and South Asia affairs. Without any further ado, I would now like to hand over the session to Mr. Jaiswal. Sir, please take over.
Thank you, Paki, for kind introduction. Major General BK Sharma, a scholar from USI and NICE, and dear participants. First of all, welcome to the joint webinar of NICE and USI. Before we start, I would like to briefly talk about Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement is an independent, apolitical, and non-partisan think tank which believes in freedom, democracy, and a world free from conflict. We envision a world where sources of insecurity are identified and understood, conflict are prevented or resolved, and peace is advocated. Today's talk is part of our neighborhood studies. Neighborhood studies looks at the range of cross-cutting issues such as political development, economic activities, cross-border activities, foreign affairs related issues, and security surfacing in its immediate neighbor, India and China, in addition to its extended neighbors such as Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and Maldives. In the past, we had discussions with scholars and policymakers from the region. We have invited the State Minister of Education from Maldives, Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan Ambassador to Nepal, many former diplomats and well-known scholars from India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Bhutan. As you are aware, today we have Major General BK Sharma to talk on very important and contemporary issues, dynamics of India, China, and Pakistan. We'll be having free and frank conversation with him today. Major General BK Sharma was commissioned in the SIKHLIGHT Infantry Regiment in 1976 and superannuated in 2012. He is a director of United Service Institution of India, India's oldest think tank established by the British in 1870. He was conferred 3 military awards by the President of India for rendering exceptional distinguished national service and for displaying courage. Despite he was conferred National Award for National Building by the Confederation of Education Excellence of India in 2017. He has tenanted prestigious assignment in India, including the command of a mountain division on China border and senior faculty member of the National Defense College. He has represented his country in the United Nations as a military observer in Central America and has been India's defense attaché in Central Asia. He specializes in strategic needs assessment, methodology, scenario building, and strategic gaming. He has visited around 35 countries as a member of international delegation and on education tours. He has participated in 29 international conferences abroad and several such conferences in India. He has edited 8 books, contributed more than 60 seminal papers in Indian journals and newspapers and foreign journals, and presented 30 research papers at international conferences. He edits prestigious USI Strategic Year Book. He has lectured at prestigious military establishment, policy think tanks, and universities, literature festivals in India and abroad. He regularly participates in track 2 level discussion and dialogues. I'd like to once again welcome Major General BK Sharma to the program. I would also like to request our audience to drop their question in the chat box or on the Facebook Live. Before we start, I would like to request Major General Sharma, the Director of USI, to briefly introduce his institute. Sir?
Thank you very much, Dr. Pramod, and NICE for again pairing up with us to hold this very important event. USI is a 150 years old institution, the oldest think tank, and we are into strategic security research, historical research, distant learning programs, and many other such facets. And we do a lot of projects for the National Security Council, Ministry of Defense, for the service headquarters, and also undertaken a lot of joint projects with our partners in foreign countries. I think without much ado, all I would like to say that please do visit our website, as also follow us on the USI Facebook page and our Twitter handle, so that you get to know all our activities and different publications which we take out from time to time. So with these few words, I request Dr. Jaiswal to further progress this proceeding.
Thank you, sir, for the introduction. Let me begin. Let me start with India-China, as the two countries are in border standoff since months. So my first question for today is, what is the principal cause of the tension between India and China? What is the present status? In your view, what scenario is likely to plan out?
Thank you very much. Most of the people are very well familiar with the developments which are taking place on India and China border. I will not bore you with what is already obvious. I just wish to state that much of it lies in the DNA of China. And what is that DNA of China is that it has that middle kingdom mindset. I was saying that much of the trouble that is brewing up on India-China border, its seeds lie in China, and that is China's middle kingdom mindset, which it had practiced with certain degree of subtlety and sophistication, which had elements of Confucian wisdom, Sun Tzu's stratagem, Mao's pragmatism, and Deng Xiaoping's patience. But there comes Xi Jinping, President Xi Jinping, a man in great hurry, and he has turned everything on its head, and he's followed that socialism with Chinese characteristics, which in other words means authoritarianism, ultra revisionism, ultra nationalism, and opportunism. And why I say opportunism? Because he's picked up the most inopportune moment in the human history to show belligerence. And that is the COVID pandemic, which is a strategic shock which has come for the rest of the world, where the nation should have, in China as a great power, should have put its shoulder to the wheel to deal with this humanitarian crisis. But it has seized this window to pursue its so-called core interest. And therefore, whatever happened on Indian border cannot be linked with China's overall belligerence and strategic behavior in the Western Pacific and South China Sea. So it is part of that series that it started flexing its military muscle on the line of actual control by throwing all the accords and agreements that it had signed with India since 1993 to the winds. And it resorted to a major build-up and military aggression at the line of control. And what was the purported reason for that aggression was to assert its claim to a so-called 1960 claim line, which was espoused by Chavan Lai then, and thereafter a lot of water had flown and we had settled into an understanding of LAC based on 1993 agreement and the agreements that followed therefrom. But he came and he sort of in a very major build-up, he started asserting and went for multiple incursions. Now, what was the reason for him to undertake this kind of a step? First and foremost was to politically and militarily embarrass India, thinking that India is in the throes of corona pandemic and therefore it will not be able to size up to China's belligerence at the border, and it will deliver India a fait accompli of its 1960 claim line. There were additional factors like, to take some heat off Pakistan, because India had taken a very strong and I would say a very assertive position towards Pakistan to, call its bluff of cross-border terrorism. And China has de facto emerged as a third party in JNK dispute. I won't call it dispute, JNK illegal occupation by China, because the whole CPAC is passing through Gilgit-Baltistan and India was getting more assertive. So it did something in an area where it could take some heat off Pakistan. That was another reason. But this was a very big miscalculation on part of China, was they were not able to fathom the Indian stoic and resolute response and degree of military preparedness it has exhibited. As a result, now we are into a very serious confrontation. There are 40 to 50,000 troops lined up on both sides with heavy military arsenal deployed. And as the situation stands today, there are 4 areas where we have very serious problems. One is Galwan, where that incident had happened in mid-June. We have an uneasy disengagement in Galwan, but in Pagangso Lake North area, Chinese continue to be in Finger 4 area, whereas up to Finger 8 is Indian territory. But Indians have also gone and occupied higher heights in that area and checkmated Chinese. Then in the beginning of August this year, when Chinese were trying to capture some more heights along the LAC, south of Pagongso Lake, in a very sensitive area, what is called Spangur Gap, which would have opened an avenue of approach towards Indus Valley, which leads to Lake. We went in a preemptive move and we occupied those heights at the line of control, which are on our own side. About 20 heights have been occupied. There is an uneasy kind of a truce which is in the area of Dapsang, which is further to the north in the vicinity of Karakram Pass and that advanced landing ground of what you call the Dolsbeg Oldie, where Chinese have come about 15 kilometers, though that area is, the perceptions are different, but they are blocking our patrolling to certain patrolling points there. So as a result, the situation is extremely tense. Now, this was coupled with certain diplomatic initiatives, be it our defense ministers talk with their defense minister in Moscow, followed by the foreign minister's talk and the 5-point agreement. But what is followed after that, it doesn't augur well for lasting peace. Because India is insisting on maintaining status quo ante, whereas China is putting the whole blame on the Indian side and dishing out various threats to India that you must disengage and go back into your own area. So at the moment, we are into a very, very serious situation. But all that I can assure you that India's political leadership and military has taken a very strong stand and we are not going to budge. Now hereafter, we are expected to have another round of Corps commanders level talk, but I do not visualize any major outcomes of military level talk. If at all any development will take place, that will be at the political level talk, whether it is the special representative group or maybe at the very highest level. So winter is now approaching, and there is a very critical window which India is watching, that maybe in the month of October or something, Chinese could further up the ante and do something. But I can assure you that it would be at China's peril, because India is more than prepared. We do not want war. But should China only take recourse to a military option, then India would be more than prepared, both at the military level as a nation, to call Chinese bluff and to stand up to their bullying behavior. That's all I can say. I can't hear you.
Sir, next question. One of the major India's security concern is China-Pakistan security nexus. In the ongoing tension, according to you, how is this nexus likely to manifest?
Pakistan, as we all know, is a linchpin in China's South Asia strategy to restrain India. It is what they follow is to kill with a borrowed knife, and that borrowed knife is Pakistan. For China, Pakistan is a low-cost deterrence against India. And for Pakistan, China is a high payoff security guarantor. That is how this strategic relationship is. And this relationship has got further solidified with China-Pakistan economic corridor, as you now know that probably it's a matter of time before Pakistanis will declare Gilgit-Baltistan as the 5th province of Pakistan, which will have very serious political implications. At the moment, well, Pakistan has always fished in troubled waters in the past. They have been revisionist, and they have resorted to so many offensives against India. It's another matter that in every war, they had a bloody nose. At the moment, if you look at internal dynamics of Pakistan, there are problems. Their economy is in shambles. There is a sword of FATF which is hanging on their head. There are problems within the political dispensation there and its relations with military. And there are a whole lot of issues there. There are two schools of thoughts which are presently doing circles in Pakistan. One is that while India is beset with a serious China challenge, they are prompting them to take recourse to some adventurism and do some kind of a 1962 kind of a thing, so that India is put at some disadvantage. There is another school of thought that Pakistan should not get embroiled in this dispute because of their internal dynamics and probably subsequent retribution that would be meted out to them by India. And therefore, let China do the heavy weight lifting, and Pakistan becomes a beneficiary of whatever outcomes are. If India gets embarrassed, then it is to the advantage of Chinese. But here, as Indian strategic analysts, we are looking at a whole range of scenarios in which Pakistan could play a role. And at the lower end of the spectrum is the asymmetric warfare which they have been unleashing against India, where they could probably intensify their cross-border terrorism and also do for some kind of a military posting along the LOC. And there were reports about 2 divisions having been deployed in Gilgit-Baltistan area. They could also up the ante and undertake some sensational terrorist strikes against India of the like what had happened in Uri and Pulwama. And therefore, now throw the ball in the Indian court that if India responds as it did in Balakot, then they will blame India for upping the ante and waging war on Pakistan. And if India doesn't respond, then tell to their own domestic audience and international community that India is a paper tiger and it is a soft state and it cannot size up to India. But should things get heated up between India and China and the escalation takes place, there is a probability of them resorting to certain nibbling actions, particularly in northern Ladakh, where their political and military objectives coincide with that of China, so that they can tie down our troops and they can distract us there. And should this conflict with China, it escalate horizontally into certain other areas, or it proliferates vertically, then India is also prepared for a worst case scenario, and that is China totally bandwagoning with the Pakistan totally bandwagoning with China, and we have to fight a two-front kind of a war. But India at the moment has already visualized, factored in all these scenarios, and we are prepared. Probably, if worse comes to worse, India may be able to deal with China, and we have enough military capabilities to stop or to prevent any ingress from China, Pakistani side. So while we are dealing with China subsequently, well, then we can make a specimen out of Pakistan and deal with them on our own terms. So this is how the situation is.
Sir, you have beautifully explained the China-Pakistan nexus and its impact on Indian security with symbols like borrowed knife and low-cost tool. I really enjoyed that connotation. But how do we look at the role of external powers in India-China-Pakistan dispute? Basically, the role of Russia and the United States.
See, these countries have always got embroiled in India, Pakistan, China contestation indirectly in the past also. In the present context, if you look at United States, it has rendered open support to India, and it has blamed China as an aggressor at the line of actual control. Concurrently, there has also been some kind of a strategic posturing in the Indo-Pacific, wherein they have beefed up their deployment in Diego Garcia and Guam, and tier 2 to 3 aircraft carrier, they are moving in South China Sea and things like that. There are also very serious talks about an Indo-Pacific charter, be it in the form of Quad or any other Indo-Pacific alliance, that has also gained traction. They have been helping us, and they can help us with intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance by speedy delivery of some of the force multipliers which we require to bridge this power asymmetry, combat power asymmetry with China. Presently, they also have virtually a trade and technological war which is going on with China, and they have upped the diplomatic fight against China by denying them visas for all those people who are involved in Xinjiang or sort of Tibet, and those people who've been involved in militarization of some of these islands. So they've been denied visa, and this visa denial can even extend to PLA and party members. There are about 90 million party members, and if this visa denial by United States is extended to party members with their families, then it is going to hit them in a very big way, because a large number of their kith and kin are studying in the Chinese, in the US universities abroad. So we hope that, well, US will probably come to India's diplomatic support in a very big way. As far as Pakistan is concerned, there is a certain degree of reliance of US because of withdrawal from Afghanistan and this intra-Afghan dialogue and other things that are very critical state. So maybe there would be some kind of a covert pressure we should expect. US telling Pakistanis to sort of lay off and not to get embroiled in these tensions, and probably that pressure can really work. So these are the hopes and expectations that India has as far as US is concerned. In regard to Russia, Russia's strategic alignment with China has strengthened in the past 1 decade because of countering NATO and US being some kind of a common rival for them. And there is a subtle tilt in Russia towards China. But at the same time, geopolitically, they do look at India as a balancer in the balance of power in Eurasia. So therefore, they would not go to the extent of antagonizing or undermining India's interests. And therefore, they will position themselves as they have done during the SCO to be some kind of an interlocutors and provide a platform for some kind of dialogue between China and India. They have done it in the SCO. They could use the platform of BRICS and even RICS in times to come. They have in the past openly come in India's support on China raising the issue of Kashmir in United Nations, and they would also be fulfilling their commitments of supply of military hardware and other things to India. So I would say that they would play a balancing role and probably have a moderating behavior in the ensuing tensions between India and
China. Thank you, sir. There's one very similar question related to it, which we have received in the on the social media, so I will put it here. Do you think for Pakistan, China is the new America? Do you think China's engagement with Pakistan or US engagement with Pakistan are different?
See, Pakistan and China relation is very close, and they both need each other. China needs Pakistan because of the strategic reasons. They want the CPAC, and particularly they want to use Gwadar as a gateway to Arabian Sea and to Indian Ocean region, right? And it is also some kind of a countervail towards India. And similarly, for Pakistan, China has become very important that because Pakistan is getting isolated from rest of the world. Their relationship with the US is not the same what it was in the past. Similarly, they're having serious trouble with the Arab countries. Their relations with Saudi Arabia and UAE are not in the best of health. Therefore, their reliance is more and more on China. Therefore, this relationship is there to stay. In regard to US-Pakistan relationship, it is more of an opportunistic. In the past, Pakistan permitted itself to be used as a rental state to pursue US geopolitical interests in Afghanistan and Central Asia. Those interests are not the same as they were in the past. I would feel that after US troops have withdrawn to 4,500 and there's further thinning out of troops, their relationship may not be the same. So it's more of an opportunistic relationship and not a very strategic in nature at this juncture. On the contrary, India and US strategic relationship is more profound, and I'm sure the US would not like to compromise that relationship for Pakistan.
Let me move to the next question. China, India, and Pakistan, all three possess nuclear weapons. China has important stakes in South Asia, and Pakistan and China are also important players in South Asia. In this context, how is it going to impact the regional peace and security?
At the outset, I would like to say that India is an extremely responsible nuclear power, and we have no first use, and we also in favor of global disarmament. And we have an excellent record of non-proliferation. As against this, if you look at China-Pakistan relations, well, Chinese have fathered Pakistan's nuclear program, and Pakistan has been the biggest proliferator of nuclear technology in the world. You know what A.Q. Khan had done. If our neighboring countries in South Asia, rest of the world have to be worried, they have to be worried about Pakistan more than anybody else. And it is Pakistan that has been, ratcheting up this nuclear card and talking about tactical nuclear weapons and first use. And India doesn't believe in bringing in nuclear weapons in the entire security calculus. Having said that, well, this tension that is going on between the three countries does not augur well for overall peace and security in the region, because the whole region gets little bit, I would say, it gets upset because of these tensions between the big countries. Let me talk about certain strategic imperatives that this tension will impinge upon. And let me first look at the geographical salience of India in terms of intra-regional connectivity. India is the only country which has borders with all South Asian countries, and therefore there is no direct link between Pakistan and remainder South Asian countries, one. But Pakistan's salience lies that it is probably got a very important location in terms of intra-regional connectivity with Central Asia and West Asia. So that is the strength of Pakistan. If the rest of South Asia wants to connect with the Central Asia or West Asia, it is through Pakistan. Likewise, South Asia is very important in China's overall Belt and Road Initiative and Maritime Silk Route, because three of their important corridors, CPEC, China-Nepal Economic Corridor and China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, they are passing through South Asian space. So for them, it is very, very important, and three countries of our South Asian construct are signatories to Maritime Silk Route. Therefore, all these initiatives and the other initiatives that we have like SARC, BBIN, BIMSTEC, these get undermined due to tensions because most of our energy is focused in contestation, then in a collaborative and cooperative kind of a relationship in which, you know, this connectivity is improved and people-to-people contact and economic integration that takes place. So those are the problems. Therefore, it is in the larger interest of all the countries that we have peace and tranquility, and this contestation is best avoided. And I would say here that the neighboring countries can play a role to impress upon countries like China and Pakistan to probably be more responsible in the interest of larger peace and security.
So let me move to Afghanistan. In view of the US-Taliban peace deal and intra-Afghan dialogue, what is India's position? What is your assessment on Afghanistan? How is it going to impact India?
India has a very historical relationship with Afghanistan, and developments in Afghanistan have always impacted the geostrategic landscape of India. At this juncture, India's national interests in Afghanistan are that we want a consolidation of democracy and containment of radical ideology there, because that can proliferate to the rest of the region. Then we want that Pakistan, which is flush with the natural resources, they have about 3 trillion worth of resources which have been mapped through various geographical surveys, that it should realize its full potential in terms of extraction and mobilization of these resources, as also use its strategic location as a bridge between Central Asia, South Asia and West Asia, be it in terms of trade and transit corridors or energy corridors, the TAPI and other pipelines. But at the same time, the way the geopolitical scenario is panning out, we do not want any geopolitical alliance there to take shape which is inimical to India's interest. And in that, the biggest challenge that we have, that there is a kind of a nexus between ascendant Taliban, Pakistan and China. And some of the other countries are also, because of short-term national interests, are supporting this kind of a construct there. So therefore, the worst case scenario for us there is that the Taliban come to the helm of affairs, and they have full support of Pakistan and China, and the jihadi ideology there takes root, and cost probably on the bidding of Pakistan they would extract is to probably tell the new regime there to truncate their relationship with India in terms of the ITEC program, a $3 billion worth of investment there in about 40 projects in about 37 provinces, and also probably make China to wind up some of its consulates and target our projects and our missions there. So this is the worst case scenario. But having said that, I would say that India has a tremendous goodwill in Afghanistan, which runs across the spectrum of society, Pashtun, non-Pashtun. We have a strategic partnership agreement of 2011. As our foreign minister very recently during Doha dialogue, he said that we very staunchly support Afghan owned, led and controlled peace process. And therefore, given the goodwill, and if this intra-Afghan dialogue succeeds in Afghanistan and there is a new government in place, which is more participative, then India will play its role in terms of being a key development partner of Afghanistan, and also render maximum support for capacity building of Afghan national defense and security forces. So we don't want to get embroiled in the crosswinds of their internal politics, and would play a very positive and constructive role while hedging against all kind of threats that are staring us in the eyes.
Let me come to a regional organization like SAARC. Given the hostile relation between Pakistan and India, what is the hope of revival of SAARC? What are the other major areas of regional integration and regional cooperation?
See, SAARC was a wonderful concept, and India has always been a supporter of SAARC. In fact, even at this juncture, the $3 million US of operational cost of SAARC Secretariat, India is funding 30% of it. And I remember just about a decade ago, some of the most beautiful programs on Doordarshan was about the culture of these regional countries. We've also established this SAARC University or South Asian University in New Delhi. A lot of students came from these SAARC countries. But the biggest spoil sport here has been Pakistan. It's been a stumbling block in the growth and progress of SAARC, and that is due to its cross-border terrorism. You would recall that 2016, why India and many other South Asian countries declined to go to Islamabad for SAARC summit was because Uri attack had happened at that point in time. And thereafter, we could not revive SAARC. Presently, some good movements are taking place in the revival of SAARC, and this initiative was taken by our Prime Minister Modi. He mooted this idea of creation of India-led SAARC COVID-19 emergency fund. And you would recall that in that meeting, Prime Minister of Pakistan did not participate. He sent one of his representatives, and all he spoke there was about Kashmir and things like that, totally digressing from the main issue. So much so that just 2 or 3 days back in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization National Security Advisors meet, despite kind of a counseling and request by the host country, that is Russia, they still flashed a map which showed large number of Indian territory as part of Pakistan. Now that is the kind of a behavior. when India had come with the idea of South Asian satellite, it is Pakistan which did not support that Indian initiative. Now something is moving, though very, very slowly. We last week we had the foreign finance ministers web meeting, and now on 24th of September we have another video conference of SARC of the finance ministers, in which is going to be led by your foreign minister, and we hope that SARC gets revived and we put the region on the path of growth. Uh, South Asia is the least integrated, economically integrated region in the world. I think it's just about 5% of intra-regional trade which is taking place, whereas we have nearly 23% of the world population. Those ideas like South Asia Free Trade Agreement and many other initiatives of connectivity, BIMSTEC, this BBIN, similarly of corridors which are going through through what you call, Wagah border towards Afghanistan. All these initiatives can be revived, and we can put the region on the path of peace and prosperity, provided there is a change of heart and mind in Pakistanis, and they start playing a more constructive role. So I would say I've been hearing this whole discourse in different dialogues, and there is a very big aspiration in other South Asian countries about revival of SARC. But I would call upon all other regional countries to also impress on Pakistan to play a positive and constructive role. Because even if there is one country, the whole SARC is actually working on the basis of consensus. And even if one country is out of sync, then this whole concept cannot take place. But hopefully, I mean, we are on the path of some kind of a slow recovery.
There is one question which has come from the people who are participating here. China has been increasing its presence in the Indian Ocean. Do you think a term that was coined by Americans and often used by Indian defense experts, the string of pearls, ambition coming true?
See, the proof of pudding is in eating it. We know what Chinese, whether you call it string of pearls or garland of pearls or whatever. But if you take a reality check, there are two main continental corridors which Chinese are constructing. One is ending up at Kai Fu in Myanmar, and second is at Gwadar, right? And these are the two strategic outposts where the continental part and the maritime part of their Belt and Road Initiative, they converge, right? Therefore, these two strategic outposts are extremely important. In concert with this, Chinese are involved in constructing about 23 projects in different countries of Indian Ocean littoral. They've already got a huge base in Djibouti from where they're using maritime reconnaissance aircraft. It's a matter of time that Gwadar will become another maritime outpost of China, and they will put it to more and more military use. They had made a big push to take control of some of the atolls and islands in Maldives, and some of these were being used into some maritime surveillance posts. With the change in regime in Maldives, at the moment that is not taking shape. Similarly, look at Hambantota port in Sri Lanka. Their submarines had started visiting, and their seafaring activities had increased. It was on objections from India that Sri Lanka put a stop to all that. They've also been involved in oceanographic survey and conducting joint naval exercises with Pakistan and many other navies. And their military naval footprints in Somalia and that Oman and these areas, that Bab el Mandeb and all these areas has increased. You look at the kind of fleet. So yes, there is a Chinese design, and most of these ports which China is constructing are of dual use, and these are being constructed by companies which are very closely aligned with China's Communist Party, and their specifications are such that they can be put to military, to commercial use now and military use later.
There's another question on China. The Chinese involvement in South Asia has activated the geopolitical tensions. To contain Chinese influence, India and US has established a strategic partnership. To what extent China's ambitious project like CPEC triggered the geopolitical rivalry in South Asia? What are the strategies being adopted by the rival stakeholders?
See, China's strategy is very clear that they want to dominate this entire area and induce a kind of a gravitational pull by pushing the neighboring countries which are in need of development into some kind of a debt trap and increase their economic dependence on China, and subsequently make them make policy choices which are in congruence with China's strategic interests. You have a case in point is about, say, Hambantota, what is the need for a country to take a port of another country for 99 years lease? What is the need for a country to take Gwadar for 50 years lease, 43 years lease? You look at today the debt of Maldives. It is the debt as stated by Chinese is $3.1 billion, which is the equivalent to the whole GDP of Maldives. So they are playing this ploy, and other regional countries have understood this except Pakistan. For example, Myanmar is in a very big way to renegotiate their terms and conditions of Chinese investment there. Similar thing has happened in Sri Lanka. There is a pushback, there were demonstration, and Maldives is also, they also not falling into the Chinese trap. So the only, I would say, the country which is totally aligned with China is Pakistan. On the other hand, they made very big headways into Nepal. And there, it's as a brotherly caution I would put on Nepal, that you should watch out what is happening in the rest of the world, while it is your own right to decide which country should come and invest how much. But there are attendant risks to that which you must figure out in the interest of your own sovereignty. Now, keeping this in view, what is the pushback from other countries? Basically, this is a quad that is coming up. Now the 4 countries will join hands, and there is also a talk of having an enlarged quad in which maybe countries like South Korea, Singapore, and some of the other countries will come and join, and some European countries have shown interest. If you see recently Japan earlier, and now France and Germany, they have enunciated their Indo-Pacific strategy, which is very much in consonance with the overall strategic vision of Indo-Pacific, that is free and stable Indo-Pacific, and which is counter to what the vision China has for that. Other initiatives by the US are Asia Reassurance Act. Then they've also got BUILD, and they're talking about DOT, that blue dot network in which different countries are participating. So these are some of the counterbalancing initiatives, and because of China's belligerent behavior, I think some of these initiatives are going to come to fruition, and we will have more balance vis-a-vis China.
Thank you, sir. There's one question by a peer.
I can't hear.
So there is one question by a PhD student called Monica. Her question is, what are the options for India in this complex web of power play? Is India waiting for US to play a bigger role in Asia Pacific? And what is your take on the 5-point CBM pact?
See, India has a very well articulated foreign policy. We were the biggest exponent of multi-vector alignment, that we want good relations with all countries. And we were also very strong exponent of concert of democracies and middle level powers, that India should not get embroiled in the great power rivalry between China and United States of America. We don't want one hegemon to substitute another hegemon. We don't want a new Cold War, and we don't want to see any confrontation. Therefore, given the size of India, India will not wait for United States of America and then jump the bandwagon. In our own right, we will play our own cards, which are in our own interest. And very briefly, what it is that I think we need to reinvigorate our neighborhood first policy. There are problems of delivery because of our unique system. So we need to fast track our developmental projects, and other things are the line of credits that we have extended to some of our neighboring countries. India should become sort of an anchor of regional economic integration and a net security provider, particularly in the arena of non-traditional security threats. We would also like to play a very important role in the Indian Ocean region and probably help other countries to harness the blue economy. And there are two initiatives which are led by India. One is that IONS, that is Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, and IORA. So we'll play more and more role. In the meanwhile, in the larger interest of peace and stability, and in consonance with UNCLOS 1982, we are ready to bind with other democratic countries and like-minded countries for bringing in peace and stability. India wants to be a force of peace and stability and not as a destabilizing force. So irrespective of what United States of America does, India is well poised and will keep playing a very positive and constructive role in the region.
There's another question by some students or participant, Dibya. To what extent should diplomacy with China be given a chance, given the trust deficit? Do you think beyond a point, diplomacy can become counterproductive?
So this question I'll connect with the first question about 5-point summit. So 5-point summit was a very good effort. That firstly, we do not want any war, the two countries, and there should be disengagement, and we should also de-escalate. And then the two sides should come together and decide this in a peaceful manner. But subsequently, you see the statements which were issued by Chinese embassy in New Delhi and their foreign office spokesperson. They've put the ball in the Indian court, and they've again come out with a rhetoric that India should learn from its past mistakes and therefore withdraw, or de-escalate. That means Chinese are not prepared to maintain status quo ante. And it is because of those provocative statements that our Indian Defense Minister had to make a very candid and a very, I would say, open statement in the parliament, both houses of the parliament, that we want status quo ante and we will not compromise even an inch of our territory. So as of now, I do not think that this 5-point agreement that was declared at Moscow is getting implemented into certain deliverables. I think situation is very, very tense. I don't see much progress, and that is more because of the Chinese intransigence than India's India's attitude towards this. And with regard to diplomacy, of course, diplomacy runs right from the beginning, you know, and while there is a conflict and post-conflict. So diplomacy is at work. That is why you had the joint secretary level talks with China. That is what you call at the joint and working group on cooperation and consultation. A series of talks have taken place. Our defense minister, foreign ministers have met. Probably there would be another round of talk. Even at the military level, there are talks. But probably, I think China, you know, is very, very particular about its image. And having made a push now, and they know that if they sort of uh, if they withdraw from wherever they have, it will be seen as loss of face. So they've not been able to come out with a very dignified exit strategy, and that is why from time to time they get back to their normal or old self and keep you know, threatening India and of consequences. So I don't think at this juncture much is going to come about, but in the long run, I think it's the diplomacy backed by strong military capabilities that will deliver results.
So there's another question on Quad, and you have answered. I think maybe if you want to add something more to it, what is your assessment on India's alliance with Quad?
India's alignment, see, we are definitely talking about Quad. We've attended all the meetings of, including the foreign ministers meeting. And there is a likelihood of another foreign minister level meeting being hosted by India in the near future. As our Prime Minister at Shangri-La Dialogue had also very clearly enunciated that India does not want to join a club of countries, which is to contain any other country. I think his Shangri-La Dialogue, June 18, that keynote address was extremely explicit, and it was very positive and constructive. But it is China that is actually pushing these countries to make Quad a reality. And India is now more than willing, seeing the behavior of China, India is more than willing to join any such initiative to balance China. I mean, we will not be shy, or we will not eschew any responsibility given the behavior of China. And if Quad comes into play, then it will not have only a military component, it will have a geopolitical component, it will have an economic component, and it will have a maritime component. And in that, Japan can play a very, very important role as far as East China Sea is concerned. India can look after Indian Ocean region, the southern part of Indian Ocean region. Australia can take care. And in the Western Pacific, it is the United States of America which becomes some kind of an anchor. And then we try and moderate China's behavior.
There's another question from Arun Agrawal. He's asking, if US and Russia remains neutral, how can we cope with a two-front war, particularly when our hardware is vintage?
See, firstly, as I had explained in the beginning, that nuclear factor will not come into India and China tensions at this juncture. India has more than adequate conventional capability to stop Chinese ingress into Indian territory. Even there is a power asymmetry between the two countries. They will not be able to sort of defeat India at the border. In fact, if they make certain ingress in certain areas, India has the capabilities to go into certain other areas. So even in a worst case scenario for India, it could be a stalemate. So nuclear card is not going to come into play because that space doesn't exist. Likewise, it is Pakistan which is flexing the nuclear card, that should India cross certain thresholds of Pakistan, be it spatial, political, economic, or degradation of their armed forces to the extent that the political capitulation of that country becomes inevitable, then Pakistan will use the nuclear card. India is not interested in fighting a nuclear war. So therefore, I don't think the present state of affairs call for any nuclear factor to be given much credence and much weightage.
So there is another question in terms on economy, like Indian Prime Minister is talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, while there is complex economic interdependence of India on China. In this context, can Indian economy survive without China?
I think this is a very exaggerated account of coupling of Indian and Chinese economy. Even in the best of times, you know, our trade with them had gone to less than 100 billion US dollars, where it was 2/3 in Chinese favor. The 2/3 of Chinese items were coming to India and they were only taking our raw material there, right? They had not opened their economy for India's software or pharmaceutical industry. So therefore, there are no costs. Yes, this API, which we use in our pharmaceutical industry, or electrical and electronic industry, was dependent on China. But India has enough internal capacity and also can easily diversify its imports from other countries. We may have a little inconvenience for a short time window, but in the long run, given the downward trajectory of economic relations with China, I think it is not going to affect India much. On the contrary, the certain very bold actions that India has taken in terms of banning Chinese applications and some of their other software initiatives in India is going to be a trend setter, and maybe many Western countries will follow a suit, and that was going to embarrass and affect China much more than how it can affect India.
There's another question in connection with Pakistan. In the border standoff between China and India, how is Pakistan going to benefit itself after being sanctioned large amount of finance by China as a counter support against India?
Well, see, Chinese and Pakistani relation I've already spoken about. How can Pakistan benefit is only for one reason, that if India has a major war with China, probably that pressure on Pakistan will get relieved. And if that pressure gets relieved, then they will be back to their old tricks of perpetuating cross-border terrorism and using some of the jihadi networks to perpetuate terror attacks in India. Knowing that, well, India has probably lost some of its military capacity to go for a major offensive against Pakistan. So it is only to that extent, but no matter what happens, even if we go into a major war with China, our capacity of punitive actions against Pakistan will remain, and this will be delivered.
There's one question by, let me check the name, Captain R.P. Singh. He's asking, could you articulate what could be the dignified exit strategy, which if China follows would clear the situation?
I think this is a very important question, that ultimately, what is the gain that China has made there? It has comes 5-6 kilometers inside Indian territory there in the areas of Finger, maybe 8-10 kilometers somewhere in Dapsang Bulge, and how it has affected China in the long run. It has antagonized the whole world, and it has lost India even as a neutral country. You know, you made India from a neutral country, you have turned India into a rival, and that has put the so-called Asian century into tatters. Now, what is the dignified exit strategy? The dignified exit strategy is disengage and withdraw your troops so that there is no physical altercation. then de-escalate. Both sides should de-escalate, and there should be a common or joint mechanism between the two sides, which should comprise both diplomats and military commanders. And in a very graduated manner, you start de-escalating and going back to your old positions, both sides, right? After that, now start delineating this line of actual control on maps, your respective perceptions. Because they never exchanged maps with us, despite 22 rounds of special representative group level talks. They always wanted to, keep it very, very ambiguous. So delineate this line of control, and whichever other areas of dispute. So far, there were about 24 areas of dispute. If some more areas of dispute are there, put them on the map, sign, and you say, okay, we'll have a hands-off approach to this area to begin with, and subsequently some kind of a joint mechanism can be worked out, which is what through joint patrolling, a system like that, till we are able to improve our relationship, build strategic trust, and go for a comprehensive resolution of the border dispute. Because once border is resolved between us and Chinese, then only the way will get paved for larger cooperation and peace and stability in the whole of South Asia.
There's another question by Dr. Saurav Sukla. He's asking, is the tension on line of actual control a result of China's putting pressure on India's entangled with COVID-19, or is it the result of increasing closeness between US and India? Again, another part of the question is, or is it China's strategy of putting pressure by China to extract concessions from India, or it could lead to an open war between the two countries at a time of grave economic crisis due to COVID-19?
I had alluded to this right in the beginning of my remarks when I talked about China intent and its aggression against India. But I would just repeat certain salient points of this. I think it is an extreme opportunism on part of China, and this aggression against India should not be seen in isolation, but seen in the context of its overall behavior in South China Sea. Particularly, you look at today, there is a massive military buildup opposite Taiwan. Their military aircraft, fighter aircraft are intruding into the Taiwanese airspace. Taiwanese have responded. So they're doing this kind of a behavior. Just 2 days back, there was a problem. They went and plunged themselves within Indonesian exclusive economic zone, and Indonesian put up a very big protest. So they are not only doing this to India, but they're doing to other countries as well. Now, why they did to India? Because India is the largest country in Asia, and they look at India as a competitor. And they thought that India is distracted because of COVID, and this is high time to actually embarrass India, because India will not be able to respond, and demonstrate to India that it should not get too close to United States, demonstrate it to Indian neighbors that don't think India is too big, China can put it in its place anytime. And because of this kind of a miscalculation, they have taken this very foolhardy kind of a step. But to their disadvantage, earlier when Doklam had happened, India had stood its ground very firmly, and it was eventually China had to back off. And even now, we have called the Chinese bluff, and India will not tone down its response and its position. I think ultimately it is China that will have to maintain the status quo ante if they want peace here. So it's a variety of factors that have come into play.
There's another question by Professor Narayan Singh Rao. What should be our strategy in case India is attacked by China and Pakistan simultaneously?
No, I can't talk about the Indian military strategy in a webinar. There are people, CDS and the 3 service chiefs who would know what exactly is to be done. But one thing I can assure, if the whole nation is together, no country can subdue another country. You take the example of Vietnamese, how they have defeated superpowers of that era, and subsequently even a country like China. You know, they when they attacked Vietnam 79, they got a bloody nose. India is a huge country. You know, we have a population of nearly 1.36 billion people. We are the third largest economy. We are the third or fourth largest armed forces. India is not a pushover. Therefore, our strategy would be that our first focus would be the bigger threat, that is China. We deal with Chinese and we contain their offensive. We blunt their offensive. We are more than strong to deal with China. And with Pakistan, they will not be able to make much headway against India. And then subsequently, you know, it is not 20 over cricket match. It's a long drawn affair. And then Pakistan sooner or later will come to regret that if they take recourse to this kind of a misadventure, then it's a matter of time that if we've been able to deal with them once and bifurcate that country, well, could be more Pakistans. They have such serious regional ethnic fault lines, and then Pakistan will have a price to pay. That is what I can say.
There's another question on Kashmir. The Kashmir conflict between India and Pakistan, which got more remote in 2020, raising the chances of conflict between two Asian powers. Do you think Kashmir issue could still cause an Indo-Pakistan war in 2020?
No. See, abrogation of Article 370 and 35 Alpha has ushered a new paradigm in Kashmir. People of Kashmir, I belong to that state, have mentally reconciled to abrogation of Article 370. You see, post Article 370, there have not been any protests or violence level has drastically reduced. Therefore, I do not visualize that Kashmir is going to be a cause of conflict. Pakistan doesn't have the military wherewithal or the guts to take recourse to any military actions in Kashmir. Their military knows it very well that if they do something of that nature, this time over, they are going to be very badly embarrassed in the eyes of their own countrymen, right? So they will not resort to, if they had to do something, they would have done during that crucial period of abrogation of Article 370. They were even scared to permit the people from Pak-occupied Kashmir to go for a solidarity march towards LSE. And, you know, consequently, their own military was fighting with their own people. So I don't think Kashmir is going to be a cause of a conflict between Pakistan and India. India is very strong, and I think a lot of water has flown down Jhelum River to come to that kind of a scenario.
Sir, we still have lots of questions, maybe around 25 in different platforms like chat room and Zoom room, but we are running out of time. So let me end with the last question. Do you think SAARC can play any role in resolving the tension between India and Pakistan?
No, SAARC is not a monolith. You know, it's actually a number of South Asian countries, and each of these countries are embroiled in their own problems. You must have the leverages, you know, to play a role. So at the moment, the relations, interstate relations are, you know, very complex. You see India's relations with Nepal, what is happening in Afghanistan. Maldives is a very small country. So besides passing certain declarations and resolutions here and there, I don't think they have the capacity and wherewithal to have a sobering effect on India and China, or for that matter, between India and Pakistan. But yes, in their own capacity, they can build up a consensus, and that SAARC consensus, which at different platforms can be used. as some kind of a sobering effect on some of these countries. But ultimately, most of these disputes will be resolved at the bilateral level between India and China and India and Pakistan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Maj Gen BK Sharma. It was really interesting talking to you on issues which are really important and which is of grave concern, not only for India, China, and Pakistan, but for the whole region. Thank you very much for your time. We really learned a lot, and I'm sure we all enjoyed your conversation today. Now I'd like to hand over the floor to Paki to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Distinguished speaker, chair, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of the NICE USI joint webinar, it is my honor to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of NICE to all those who have graced us with their presence. First of all, we would like to express our gratitude and sincere thanks to our guest, Major General BK Sharma, for his valuable time and insightful words. Sir, it was a great session with you. Our sincere thanks also goes to the chair, Dr. Jaiswal, our friends from the diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and the wonderful audience, of course. We're truly honored to have you all with us this evening, and we hope to stay connected with you in future as well. We welcome you as our extended family. It's really been a pleasure to have you all. Thank you so much.